President Biden said on Wednesday that reversing inflation is a top priority of his. This came after the Bureau of Labor Statistics' Wednesday announcement that consumer prices were up 6.2% over the prior year. That is the biggest increase since November 1990, more than 30 years ago. On this program and elsewhere, my next guest has long been warning about the inflation risk in America today. Larry Summers was Treasury Secretary under President Clinton and President of Harvard. Larry, you've heard Janet Yellen, the White House, all say that they're still not convinced that they have an inflation problem. It's temporary. How do you respond?
Look, they forecast that inflation would be 2% this year in the president's budget. It's 3 times that. They said in the summertime, after they'd been initially wrong, that inflation would be back to normal by the end of the year. Then they said early in the fall that inflation would subside early next year. Now they're saying that it's going to subside in the second half of next year. Sooner or later, I'm sure it will subside, but my judgment is, given the inflation momentum that has built up, that it's going to take some significant policy adjustment or some unfortunate accident that slows the economy before inflation gets back to the 2% range.
What do you mean when you say a kind of dramatic, significant policy action? Are you thinking of something sort of like what Paul Volcker had to do to break the back of inflation in the early 1980s?
We're not talking about the kind of interest rates that Paul Volcker engineered, but we are talking about a more aggressive approach to monetary policy than the Fed is now talking about. You know, there's a lesson, Fareed, from the experience of the 1970s, which is the difference between higher and lower unemployment is 2 or 3% of the people being unemployed. The difference between higher and lower inflation is 100% of the people feeling they're being robbed of purchasing power by higher prices. Now, I can explain, and I do in my economics classes, that higher prices mean higher wages, so the two go together, so it doesn't have that big an effect on people's standard of living. But that's not how most people think about it. I think inflation had a lot to do with electing Richard Nixon. I think it had a lot to do with electing Ronald Reagan. I think for many people, inflation is a test of whether the country's under control. And I think it's therefore very important for an administration like President Biden's, for a Fed like Chairman Powell's, that want to project a sense of competent control to be addressing the inflation issue.
So, Larry, explain to us, if you are right, why is it that inflation is rearing its head now? For the last 30 years, everyone who has predicted high inflation has been wrong. And you yourself used to write just about a year or two ago about how the basics, what you call the secular trend in the economy, was stagnation, was low growth, not likely to trigger inflation. What changed? What happened to change your mind?
So I've never projected inflation any time in the last 30 years. What changed my mind was that this year we had a fiscal stimulus program equal to 15%, 14 to 15% of GDP in an economy that was only a couple percent short of its capacity. And so if you inject that much demand with that little a capacity margin, it figures you're going to get inflation. And the only time we did anything like it was during World War II or during the Korean War, when we got inflation.
Now, your biggest concern was about that massive COVID relief bill that passed. Do you share the same concern about the infrastructure bill and the other bill that might go through Congress?
I don't, Fareed. I would change those bills, but if I had to vote up or down on them, I would vote up. there are two big differences. First, those bills spend less over the next 10 years than the massive 2021 bill spent over 1 year. Second, those bills, unlike the 2021 bill, have tax increases that cover the expenditures, and in addition, include significant public investments that will raise the potential of the economy to produce more, which will lead to further tax revenue. So it's a completely different picture.
So in a sense, you're saying the mistake was made by spending that $2 trillion. That's the mistake that has to be remedied. You're not advocating voting down these two bills.
No, I think it would compound the error we made last spring when we supported much too much money giving away. If now we rejected investments in expanding the economy's capacity, it would compound the error we've already made if we were to vote down this bill. Much better to fight inflation by supporting a strong and independent Fed doing what it needs to do. Much better working towards tariff reduction, working towards making sure that we procure efficiently, making sure that we support widely available energy, doing what the White House is doing and focusing on congestion in the ports and reducing shipping costs. Those are the right steps to contain inflation. We will sacrifice our country's future. We will grow the most important deficits we have, the education deficit, the infrastructure deficit, if we don't pass this bill, and we won't make any meaningful contribution to reducing inflation if we vote down this bill.